Welcome to Goldfish on Games and Cover Disc Face Off, the show where we inspect the contents of the disc and not the magazine. Today we're looking at July 1992. This includes the one for Amiga, Amiga Format and Amiga Power. Fight! We start with the one for Amiga. That included 2 demos and a bunch of PD titles, as well as a few oddities. The first demo is for the bike racing game Red Zone, a genre that I've never been big on, but this demo looks very impressive, with lots of polygons moving around. Though it's not the fastest on my Amiga 500, this really is a game for an A1200 instead. But either way, it's still very nice, if let down slightly by having to use the mouse to control it, with the right mouse button being accelerate, the left being brake, and then moving it left and right to do the steering. This probably wouldn't have been the worst thing if you were using the original tank mouse, with its ball and you really having to move it around to get any motion. But with an upgraded laser mouse, well, it is a bit oversensitive, which is something that the other magazine reviewer, Dudley of Yesterzine, also noted when he checked out this very mag for his own channel. So if you're interested in the contents of the page and not just the discs, then check out his video. Just wait till you finish mine first, okay? But other than that, this is a pretty simple demo of you time trialing it around the track, which I fail at pretty badly. The second demo is Galactic, and this is classic Amiga weirdness. You play as King Rudolph, who's had one of his really odd dreams come to life. You know, that thing that happens from time to time? And the world has become full of the characters from his favourite playing cards. So what else can you do but shoot them with a blank set of cards? Take them all out and, well, you get to move on to the next level. Simple. Now you might have noticed there are actually 2 colours, and they don't like each other, so they'll spend just as much time attacking their opposite as they will you. You might also notice they'll drop pickups when they die, from either source, so the bottom of the level just becomes full of these things. And if all of that wasn't enough, you also seem to have 2 energy bars that you can switch between by finding the unkillable kings in the stage and just walking into them. Now these look very similar to everything else that's going on, to the point where I thought they were just a regular target, but just one you couldn't take out. There are 8 levels to this demo, which is quite a bit, and there's even some bonus ones as well, so it's not a tiny demo, and it's all very trippy, but I'm not sure I'd play much of this one myself. And finally on this disc is Hollywood Trivia, which gives you quite the range of topics, from 2 types of Star Trek, to MASH, to Star Wars, to TV in general, as well as music. You then get a chance to answer 50 questions, with each of them having 4 options. Get it right and you'll get a good sound effect, as well as a bit of the picture revealed. Get it wrong and it's a bad sound effect and no picture. I'm not sure how much of a reward it is getting a bit of that picture at a time, as when you finish all the questions it seems to reveal it anyway. Or it could be that if you get over 50% it'll show it all, I'm not entirely sure. If there's a question that's stumping you, then at any time you can ask for a hint, and one option will be removed. Or you can just ask it to reveal the answer entirely, but you only get to do that 3 times. It's relatively simple, but at the same time it's not really all that bad, though I should be ashamed that I got more questions right about MASH than I did classic Star Trek. But then, how am I to remember every single planet in the show? And it turns out there is actually one last thing on this disc. And no, it's not a demo for Micropose Golf, but a set of fan-submitted replays to the magazine, with the best ones winning some sort of prize. And if you just so happen to have a copy of Golf, then you can check them out. And they are all, from what I can tell, fancy hole-in-ones, which is more or less what I would expect from a competition like this. So, with a bit of a golf clap, I think it's time we move on to the second disc, which is full of PD and shareware games, with the first being Megatron. And it's a 2-player light cycle game. There is no solo play, as well the developers stated they didn't feel like adding it. But it's perfectly fine enough for what it is. Yeah, it's a little basic in its look, but it seems to play well enough. Or at least it seems to be fine with me trying to control both cycles at the same time. But really, you can't fault them for the presentation and the music. They put a lot of effort in. There's just unfortunately not much I can say about a pretty basic version of Light Cycle. The next game is Dragon Tiles. And it's a shareware version of Mahjong Solitaire. If you've not played this before, the goal is to match tiles, but you can only select those that are on the edge of each layer. This allows you to uncover the tiles that's underneath or untrap tiles so you can make more matches. And the goal is to clear all the tiles away, which is definitely easier said than done. And this is a pretty good example of it because it has lots of different layouts that will give you lots of challenges. Because each time you play, the tiles will be randomly spread out, so it'll be different every single time. It's the type of game that I actually played quite a bit over the years, and if I had this back in my Amiga days, I would have put a bunch of time into this one as well. It has this nice clean look to it, with some imaginatively designed tiles. There's just something about some of these that really do appeal to the retro gamer in me. It's just a shame there's no music outside of the menu. But I guess with how long some of the games can take, if they picked something that was slightly repetitive, it would have become annoying very quickly. But all in all, a solid version of a classic game. The third game is Battlements, The True Confessions of a Hunchback. And this very basic menu gives a hint of what is to come, even if the musician has clearly put everything into this title track. This is based on an old 8-bit game called Hunchback, which I know about but have never played myself. So I'm really not the person to ask if you want to know how close they are to each other. But the help mentions that there are a few missing things that they couldn't be bothered to implement, such as ropes. And when we play the game itself, we find it's mostly trying to time your jumps to avoid fireballs, arrows, and other things that the game will throw at you. And the first few levels are some of the harder ones that I found as well, which is to say that I sucked at this game. Or the collision detection is very unforgiving. But either way, I really don't see me putting too much time into this. It's not my type of game, and yeah, it just wasn't fun for me. And finally we come to Omega Race. Well, the menu and the magazine call it Omega Race, but I think the game itself is actually called Amiga Race. And despite what you might be expecting from the name, it's actually an interesting take on asteroids, and one that seems to be a remake of an older VIC-20 game called Omega Race. Your chip controls like that classic game, but the difference here is that you can't go off the sides. You are contained to this screen. And on top of that, the score box in the middle is solid as well. So there's much less room for you to work with than you might be expecting. And the goal is to take out those things that look a bit like cogs, which you do by shooting them. But you can only have 4 shots on screen at once, so you can't just keep hammering the fire button, so you gotta be careful. You'll also need to look out for when they shoot back at you, or possibly transform into a spark looking thing that'll travel around much faster and possibly also shoot at you. Later levels will have them releasing these little triangle things, and you can shoot those to remove them, but they can also be left alone to act like another shield. And these things stick around between each level, but they are solid and you can collide with them and die. And if you do die, then it'll actually clear the entire screen. All in all, this is a cool little game, and one that I might come back to again in the future. But for now, I think we need to move on to the next magazine. Amiga Format. And in the best traditions of the magazine, it has a demo, a PD game, as well as 2 programs, one of which is a full edition. But let's start with the games, and first up is a demo of Supercars 3. This is another series that I've never really played. Should I start putting up counters when I say these things? This, if it wasn't already obvious, is a racing game, and the third-ish in the series. And I can't really fault how nicely this runs. There's lots of objects on screen, lots of nice banking turns with hills and valleys, and you can really get some nice speed up as well if you use the booster. And from what I can tell, you just have to make it to the end of the race, which is really only denoted by the distance bar. And well, I guess try to get first as well, as there are other cars that you'll have to try and pass. But you'll also have to deal with the police, who will try and ram you and stop you. It's all more or less standard for these types of racing games. You have to weave through traffic, avoid the cones on the road, and even some moving tumbleweeds that you can bash out the way if at the cost of a bit of speed. And then finish the race and you'll get treated to a few screenshots of the full game. It's not bad, but I think I still prefer the Lotus series. The PD game is Interlock, which is a puzzle game, and one that decides to bombard you with a bunch of text when you first start it. But the gist of it is you play as the grey ball, that I have to say has this very nice animation going on when you roll it around. And the goal is to get all the blocks of the same colour to touch each other, which is a little tricky on this first level, and I feel they could have eased you in a little bit more, as the way to complete it is that you have to get the reds to surround the blue. It's definitely a game that requires you to plan out your moves ahead, as the shape of the screen will change as well as the number of colours you have to work with. It is a fun little game, and one that came with 25 built-in levels, so there is a lot to challenge you here, and some of them will leave you scratching your head for quite a while. But if you complete it all, then it also has a level editor, which is this nice simple graphical tool. You place blocks down as well as puzzle squares and away you go. It is a very effective and very quick little editor, and all in all this is a fun little package. Yeah, the limited lives is a bit annoying, but you do get passwords for every screen, so it's not too bad. The first program is a demo for a kid's art package, Paintpot 2. And because this is a demo, it's limited to mostly flood filling these images that are provided. So yeah, pretty much it's a colouring in book. And also because this is a kids program, it had to have some repetitive nursery rhyme like music playing in the background. As well as some silly sound effects when you select the colours. There really isn't much to say here, apart from maybe the screw up by the Amiga Format editor. As if we look at the page that's going over this kids art package, we find... yeah... whoopsie! So let's move on to the full program, which is Can Do Junior. And this is quite the complex beast. So I doubt I'll be able to give this the detailed rundown it really deserves. But put basically, it's the Amiga's answer to HyperCard, as in you can create software using a card-like system. That is done via some basic controls, or by the powerful scripting engine that's also built in. And all of this is presented in a simple-ish GUI interface. And looking at the instructions included in Amiga Format, it seems it can even hook into the Workbench RX scripting system, so you can control other applications or even hardware. So this would have been a very impressive bit of software at the time. I'm not 100% sure what the difference is between Can Do and Can Do Junior. This might be a cut down version of the full thing, or it might be something different. The provided pages use both names all the way through it, so I can't really tell, but this would have been a lot of fun to experiment with back in the day. But for now we need to move on to the last magazine, Amiga Power, which only has a single demo but included 2 PD games as well as 3 shareware titles. And unfortunately that demo we've seen already, as it's Galactic. It seems July was a very quiet month for game releases, so we got a few that were repeated across the magazines, both in the commercial but as well as the PD land, as this also included a Mega Race as well. So that means the first disc we only have a single new game to check out, Number Fumbler, which when it first started I thought, wow, there's a nice title screen, but no, this is the actual game. And while it's good on them to have some very nice big graphics, it does make it very sluggish to move around. And if you've not worked it out already, this is a sliding puzzle game. Just one without any fancy pictures or anything, it's only numbers. And obviously the biggest, slowest hand around. Now there was a time when I was really good at these, but these days I tend to find them a bit annoying. I've obviously lost that knack. Let's move on to the final disc of the episode. And wait, what? That's not Workbench. Nope, this is Game Disc 2 by Mental Image. And after that jokey intro, it's into this very slick menu, which allows you to select one of 3 shareware games from this very nice looking and animated book. First up is Invaders 2. That from the name you might expect a Space Invaders clone, but from that radar you might expect a Defender clone. Well really, it's a little bit of both. The radar is showing you ships that are trying to take out your base, and you have to stop them. There is a big ship with a smaller one escorting them on each wave. Your job in your little craft is to keep shooting them till they explode. All while avoiding their lasers, bullets, and these weird little orby things that you shouldn't ponder but destroy as well. Finally, you'll crack their shields and they'll go down in some lovely, if frame rate killing, special effects. Take out all the waves and you get to go on to the next level, where more or less the same thing happens again and again, but this time the ships have slightly better shields. You do get to counter this by being sent upgrade crafts from your base, which seem to come out at random, and these might give you more health or upgrades to your gun. And it seems it's not just enemy craft that want to get you, as objects on the ground also like to attack as well. It would have been cool if their shots also affected the enemy ships, but nope, it's just you that they want to hit. And this is pretty much the game. There is this reverse upgrade craft that will come from the other direction, and it will also drop a pod, but if it lands, it will start to fire missiles at you, rather than helping. This isn't the most complex or original title, but it is fun enough in short bursts, I guess. The second game is Wiley in the Castle of Dreams, that after the title screen has quite the high score table. And a very fancy main menu. In fact, the whole game has a high level of presentation, which makes the single screen platformer a little bit of a disappointment. It's pretty clear what you need to do from the little intro animations, but damn, that's not exactly the easiest first level. Not when you're trying to work out the jump physics, which turns out are fixed. You have no in-air control, because that would have helped you out way too much. And the second level ramps it up even more, as you have to avoid the face, as well as this fish that flies around, and those very nicely animated crushers. All in all, this is a very nice looking game. It has lots and lots of polish, but the actual gameplay feels like something of a lost C64 game, and I was hoping for a little bit more. Satu is the third game, and it's a puzzler. That on my first blind playthrough I couldn't work out what I was meant to be doing. So I checked the instructions and I was still slightly confused, as well as surprised by the lightning that would keep going off. Why is that needed? But the basics are, you have to make the big grid look like the small grid on the HUD. And the trick is working out what is meant to be a covered square versus an empty one. Oh, and also working out what happens when you actually click on a grid square, as it's not as simple as affecting the one you want, no, as each one is linked to another. But once you've worked that all out, it's not too hard. So obviously, by the 7th level, they have to change it up. So now clicking on one square affects multiple ones. And here the difficulty jumps up massively. And it doesn't really help that you're timed. Quite aggressively timed as well. I was really enjoying the game, but it does need to give you more time to really work it out. Or even drop that concept completely. This game would have stood on its own without the need for it. This is one I will probably come back to, but that time limit is going to annoy me. And with that, we have come to the rankings, and I think it's another tough one to call. But in third place, I think it has to be Amiga Format. It had some cool demos and PD, and Can Do was really interesting, but it just wasn't quite up to the others. In second place, I think it has to be Amiga Power. It had some of the same games as the One magazine, and while its shareware was fun, it was also a little lacking. And number Fumbler, yeah, that was a bit poor. So obviously, in first place, it is the One. Even if I'm not a big bike fan, Redline was a great demo, and it had some really cool shareware. I could have played Dragon Tiles for ages. And with that, we close out another month. As always, I would be interested to hear if you thought I got it right or wrong, or if you enjoyed any of these discs in the past. So until next time, I was the Goldfish, that was a king with some very weird dreams, and this was Goldfish on Games. Thank you for watching this cover disc face-off. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, then you can help me out with my dreams by clicking the buttons just below the video. You know the ones I'm talking about. or you might want to check out some of the other videos that I've done, as there's some on the screen right now. So I hope to see you again soon.